If you look at the world and scratch your head and wonder how all of this could happen in our faces and can't come up with an answer, I think I can give you some insight. I've been doing what I can to analyze the mindsets, the psychology, the beliefs of, let's just say, our enemy. And by our, I'm referring to mankind. And for religiously minded people, I am quite literally referring to what they would call the devil's children. So, how could all this happen? Have you listened to the lectures from Yuri Bezmenov? You should look him up online on YouTube if you haven't. Yuri, and then Bezmenov spells out phonetically. Bezmenov or OF, Bezmenov, or Bezmenov, I forget. And he gives a very, very, very good description and explanation of what subversion is, of what subversion does, and the end result of subversion. If you don't understand what subversion is, if you don't understand, and I mean by way of having listened to somebody that actually knows and shares the information, and then you sat there and willfully consumed it, processed what was said, and have an understanding of what subversion is, what it does, and the condition that it puts people's minds in. Well, let's look at how do you subvert a nation. Well, you have to have control of things. You have to be able to influence things. You have to be able to affect things. Now let's consider, which is what most people will consider to be a relatively ambiguous term, social engineers. And I'm not referring to it from a IT hacker perspective. I'm talking about it from the way that Edward Bernays was talking about it in his book Propaganda from like 1929. If you haven't read the book Propaganda by Edward Bernays, before you continue to listen to this, I would suggest that you do one thing. Open up another tab on your browser, type in Edward Bernays Propaganda PDF. You're going to find it pretty quickly, and then open that PDF, and it's a small book, it really is, so read the first page, and he explains what social engineering is at a high level. He says everything that you desire, that you want, and all these other types of things, your desires, your tastes, are formed for you by men you will never know, who sit, quote unquote, up on high, and present these things to you. Okay? How would that happen? How would that happen? Well, let's look at the ways in which the human mind is influenced. Television, Hollywood, school system, those three are the most predominant because we sit ourselves or our children in front of the television. We send our children to the government-controlled public school systems. We go and watch Hollywood movies. The television and the silver screen, so to speak, the Hollywood screen, they've known for a very long time aspects of the human being that we didn't know. And they know that when you watch, you can be lulled into what's known as a hypnagogic trance. And this is a condition where you are at a lesser state of consciousness, not as aware, and more specifically, your conscious filters are gone or limited in their scope and capacity and effectiveness. So if they can get people into a hypnagogic trance through the technology that we are willingly sitting ourselves in front of, get our filters down, and then through the information that they have crafted, they write the scripts, they insert their agendas, their ideologies, and the themes, and then we willfully take this stuff in. And if our filters are down, or not functioning and operating at their optimal capacity because we're in effectively a hypnagogic trance, people don't understand because we don't understand ourselves that this information is going into our subconscious mind, slowly molding, forming, crafting, laying in brick by brick foundational aspects of what we believe and what we perceive. That is some hardcore fact right there. That's exactly what is happening. Now, to the degree that you can see what has been going on with the sexuality of children in the Western world, let's just say over the last decade, it's probably longer, but let's just go with the last decade. That has been happening so largely at school. And when you start listening to, if you're over on BitChute or other platforms where people upload these videos and you can see these mindsets of these toxic, quite literally rancid-minded people that are very willfully programming the minds of our developing children, while we, having entrusted in the school system, entrusted the teachers, I mean, they teach children, for crying out loud. Who thinks who would by default think, this is tied into most of us don't think this way, who would by default think that their teachers that are teaching their children would be willfully putting toxic and immoral and rancid ideas, programming the minds of their children while the parents are at school. While the parents are at work, focusing on making the money so that they can pay the home, pay the bills, so that we can pay for our existence here in this reality is effectively what they're doing. And then you can see even further, social engineers. For instance, there were 4 women of the clan, of the tribe, back in the 60s that were pushing feminism. Pushing. It helped to break up the family unit. It helped to add more enmity between man and woman. And the more you have, and they helped a lot to hypersexualize our society. I mean, this is specifically America, but I'm sure it was happening in Australia and Europe and Canada. So you get the family units broken up. You have the people who are effectively the social engineers, that the people who control the mechanisms of influencing our mind make sure to put these people on television, in these mechanisms of influence of our mind so that they can say their stuff and program our minds. Continue to do it, and over time you have a generation that's been completely programmed. You got a generation who spent most of their time, entertaining themselves through the television. Think about what I can do to you if I control these mechanisms of influence. I'm your enemy. I understand how you operate as a being. You don't. And then I just continue slowly and imperceptibly over time, programming and pumping your head full of information that I want you to have, which is going to, for many people, form the box of perception that they will live, exist, and experience life within. Now, if you're old enough, or if you've done enough research to kind of have your own sense, they really worked hard on the boomers. This peace, love, and hope and dope, and free sex, and hippie love, and all that other kind of bullshit. That really, that's where Woodstock came in, and this whole mindset started to be really pushed into the entirety of the boomers generation. And then they did what they did with the X-Gen. I can't say all the things that they did to hypersexualize, but it was all stuff in the background. It's all stuff in TV, in movies. They worked on the millennials generation, and then they worked on the Z generation. Now, when I say they worked on, it seems kind of ambiguous. But I assure you that there are social engineers, these people who work in these think tanks, these people who control the governments, the people who control the politicians, the people who have access to television, to media, to newspapers at the highest levels of access. And these are all people with the same agenda, part of the same group of people. And it sucks that those of us that have actually put in the time to figure this out, since these assholes know so much about how the human being's mind operates, that because they've spent so much time programming the human mind, that those of us that actually venture off the reservation, so to speak, and figure all this shit out, they actually know. They know very intimately that the information that the one, like Plato's cave, finds that defies everything they thought, when they come back and try and share it with the people in the cave, they'll deny it. Again, Yuri Bezmenov says that amidst mountains of evidence, the properly, successfully subverted mind will deny until the military boot is crushing its balls. So these same people that control the banks, that control the school systems, that have penetrated every layer of government that there is to penetrate, all the way up to the cabinets of the presidents for as long as most of us that are listening to me have been alive. So for those of you that are old enough, look at society. If you just look at society, and if you can see it from the boomers generation to the X-Gen, to the millennials, to the current Z-Gen, which are the up-and-comers. I mean, the Z-Geners are now as old as, 24, 25, fighting-age males in war, in the military. Not only with the social influence of television, media, also technology, phones, games. They're also weaving themes and ideas through games, video games, these things that are addictive. These same social engineers, it's the same people, it's the same group, and you've got all kinds of people working for them. There's the video that's floating around the internet. It has been for a while. It's not hard to find. Of the people who started Instagram, Facebook, and a handful of those other ones, doing this this conference of sorts, and they're up on the stage. There's a big audience, and they're talking about things. And this one guy who started Facebook, I think it was, he's sitting there telling you, we knew that this was going to affect culture and society and the way, affect human interaction in profound ways. They knew what it was going to do, and for those of us that are old enough and have watched the last 20 years and seen what's happened, they fucking knew that. And then he goes on to say, and we did it anyway. And then most of the videos of that particular guy, you'll see cut off as soon as he says that. But if you find the original video where they don't cut it off, the scene, you'll see that he cackles. He cackles and then rubs his hands together. And that's a very specific thing for a very specific group of people, that cackle and rubbing together of the hands. He fucking did that as soon as he got done telling everybody. He told you straight to your faces, humans. We knew what we were doing and the impact it would have on society and human interactions and all this other stuff. And we did it anyway. Ha, 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 ha. Cackle, cackle, cackle. Rubbing hands together, rubbing hands together, rubbing hands together. And him and all the rest of them are fucking billionaires. Period. Paragraph. They're fucking billionaires. And they literally did knowingly rip society apart in the ways in which they had their effect. If you don't call that social engineering, then I don't know what to tell you. You're still struggling to understand basic concepts of logic and reason if you're in that condition. Now, if you understand, even at a high level, what the trivium is, you got to understand what that does for the human by learning the trivium, its tools. It's education that gives the human the tool set to use the components and the faculties that are within them. You know, when you start to dive into the trivium and you start to realize that it was created by the Pythagoreans and that there were other extremely smart people like Plato and Socrates and Aristotle that made contributions to the components. I think the Pythagoreans came up with like the framework. This is loosely said. And I think these other philosophers added components to the framework and other people. This was given to humans so that we had the tools to come to know the truth, to interpret reality to the best degree that we could, to understand how to use logic and reason, to understand grammar, logic, rhetoric, communication. Logic for Christ's sakes, and being able to speak and articulate. And it's not about artisticness or artistic anything. It's about just being able to effectively communicate what it is that you know. It's quite literally the tool set that we need at a foundational level to be a human in this reality. So, these people that I'm referring to, that you could call them social engineers, there's a handful of labels you could affix to them or that they have proudly worn. How do you justify, based off what I said the trivium is, how does anybody justify the fact that we as a society collectively allowed or didn't know? Maybe we didn't know. Maybe they did it quietly. The trivium was removed from general education about 100 years ago. It was shortly before or right around the time the rise of the silver screen became a thing. The silver screen was the first iteration of Hollywood. A technology, a means by which people would sit in front of, and we weren't sophisticated then to these things. And we would sit ourselves in front of this and let them and watch the entertainment, not realizing we were being programmed. And then the rise of the TV stations, the rise of the news, the rise of the pushing of the idea that the truth is coming to you in the news. You know, Ted Koppel at 6 p.m. or whatever it was when I was coming up. So you begin to build a mindset through constant repetition. You know, government is your authority. You got newscasters talking about it in this way, using very specific phrasing. The authorities, saying it in very, very specific ways, with specific tonalities and neurolinguistic programming language and all kinds of other stuff that we're not aware of. They're literally using weapons, verbal weapons, technological weapons, packaged as entertainment or delivering the news. And it's literally programming our minds. And when you start to unpack that and realize that there's various themes and agendas, layers of this shit in TV, in sitcoms, in cartoons, in Hollywood, in Disney, that they've been feeding into the minds of humans. For instance, the cops are always good and always right, so they've got the TV show Cops running for 30 fucking years. Every movie just about that you see, cops are always the good guys, they always get the bad guy in the end. That kind of stuff. These themes, over time, begin to program and influence the perception, the perspective of an entire society. Slowly, imperceptibly, over time. Now, let's say I started at 3 years old, 2 years old, in diapers, watching Disney. Boom, 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 go through the years. By the time I'm 23, I'm pretty sure cops are always good. They're generally the good guys. And all those, because of TV, because of cartoons, because of movies, because of all these themes from the time I was a child until I was like 23. Then I have a kid. My wife, same thing. She came up at the same time as me. We both believe all that. So it's probable we're going to start teaching or instilling or imbuing those concepts into the minds of our developing children. On top of that, they're going to still continuously get it from the mechanisms or vehicles of influence of the very minds that we are. You see what I'm saying? Not that we are, that came out wrong. Of our minds, and the very beings that we are, influencing and affecting our minds. And when you think to yourself, how could they have done all this? Well, they have they have all the money, they control all the money. People are corruptible for money. Most of this has gone through the avenues of corrupting politicians, and our own government has sold us out. Our own government. because they're corrupt pieces of filth, have taken bribes, have taken money. It's just, there's so many things involved in this relevant to the literal rancidity of government, the corruption of government. It's always been that way. It's always been that way, whether you believe me or not. At 52 years old almost, I know what the fuck I'm talking about. If you don't believe that, meaning what I'm telling you, the government has always been corrupt. It's been a corrupt institution. You can't find one around the world that's fucking morally sound or anything. It's always been tyrants and rulers and oligarchs and control. And, in the Roman days, you got the centurions. They were the cops of the day. You got the cops here doing what they're doing. Think about it. You got these petty tyrants with a propensity for murder. Most of them are on the cluster B spectrum. They've dumbed down the freaking requirements to be a cop. So if you're too smart, they won't fucking hire you. And then they train you up. They train you. They don't actually educate you in law. They give you training. The cops with the gun and the propensity for murder don't actually have any real education in the very quote-unquote laws they're supposedly out there upholding. You see what I'm saying? That's all going to be done in a courtroom. So what premise or pretense do they have to be making the judgments that they do, if you will? I use that term loosely, against people, short of them doing strong-arm and bad shit, obviously. But when you look at what these guys do and the games they play with people and the fear that everybody is in relevant to them, the fact that they're armed, whether it's Europe, Canada, America, Australia, they're armed. They don't want you to be armed. Think about this, people. This is fucking absurdity. And when you start looking at this deeper, you start seeing these are all mechanisms and components of a particular ideology that is held by a particular group of people, a particular tribe on this earth. They're the ones responsible for this. This has been happening over the course of several hundred years as they slowly lay in layer after layer after layer. And then since we're born into a world where the layers that were already laid in were there and present, we're used to it. This is the way we see things. Think about it. And since we don't know how that happened and we're not aware of the way the social engineering and the mind programming and the mind control works, while we're coming up, this is all happening in front of our faces and we don't even fucking recognize it for what it actually is, and they're programming us. Now, consider for the most part, and again, what I'm about to say, I'm not ripping on millennials. I don't have any problems with millennials. They're human beings. It's just the generation after mine. I don't have any problem with Z-Geners. We're all humans here, right? Right. Well, that's a loosely used term, I guess, but I think you get the point. I'm not shitting on any of these generations. So when I say what I say, if you're a millennial or a Z-Gen, please don't think I dislike you or hate you or think you're shit or anything like that. It's not that. It's not what it is. But because I'm of a generation that's old enough to have millennial children or Z-Gen children, I'm old enough and I'm wise enough to be able to actually see this. With the way the technology, the video games, the things that produced the incel, the things that produced the millennial, the adult that didn't have life skills, that, the meltdowns and all of these types of things that we see that have entered into our society out of grown adults that are in these age ranges. So it lends itself to the attack that those generations had. Now, when you start thinking Common Core, it gives you an example of how they've been slowly and methodically, willfully working to dumb everybody down. I mean, you got the first obvious iteration of that when they removed the trivium and moved forward. I don't know what the boomers didn't get that they were supposed to, other than obviously the trivium. That's a common theme. I don't know what my gen didn't get or what the millennials didn't get, but clearly the Z-Geners, they were subjected to Common Core. So we can see there's a what's the word I'm looking for? Steady progression to the dumbing down of our society. Now, if you have, at the same time, blankets of trauma that are being blanketed across the generations from all of the myriad of ways that these things take place, from the family unit, from the bullies in school, or war traumatizes the men that go and do it and survive and have to come back, the damage they deal with in their minds and emotional bodies because of what they had to do to survive, yada, yada, yada. Then that causes them to get on drugs and drink. That keeps them with PTSD. This stuff, it has a corrosive and causative effect on the family unit. Child abuse and things like that can be born out of these things. There's just a lot of different ways that the blankets of trauma hit us, but it affects every single generation. So when you look at, for instance, the generations where the meltdowns started coming, the rise of the Karen, and other such things, it shows, when you understand these things, the amount of work that's been put into to willfully degrading, dumbing down, and then traumatizing the human species generation by generation. And when you start to program their beliefs and then they're fragile and damaged and then information is presented to them that defies what they believe, you don't have a logical, reasonable, rational human being that's like, oh, wow, there's new information. I think what I believe was wrong. No, you get meltdowns, you get meltdowns and other such things. Or you get denial, you get resistance, you get all kinds of very unpleasant things. And that's not just the millennials or the Z-Gens. That would happen with everybody because of the way that we're built and wired. Now, if you just take what I've said and ask yourself, well, who would know all these things? Huh? That's an open-ended question. I think it could be unpacked fairly well, but not only do they know this, they also have the resources to do everything. How could they have that? Well, that's money. Well, who controls all the money? Start tracing everything back to its source, and it starts to reveal itself. But when you start to think of, to the degree that you know this, can see this, have observed this for yourself, or just recognize that, I'm relatively accurate with this, the condition that a substantial portion of millennials are in, and the Z-Gen. See, with millennials being as old as, 42, 43 now, give or take, you're talking millennials and Z-Gens are the predominant generations that they're trying to appeal to in TV, magazines, movies, Hollywood, mainstream, all that other stuff. And even more specifically, it's those Z-Geners and the young ones that are coming up now. Think about that. Well, have you ever seen videos of millennials and even some of the tail end of millennials, Z-Gens, or the people at the tail end of the millennials? People will go out on the streets of various cities and just ask them basic questions about America, about certain things that used to be very common knowledge. And we can see how, and when I say dumbed down, I'm not criticizing anybody. This is a willful withholding and lack of information that make our youth and the younger ones not as knowledgeable. They don't have the foundation. They weren't taught the right things. They weren't given the right information, and the information that they were given in a lot of respects was absolute shit. Now, when you think of it from a perspective of an enemy that's slowly and methodically trying to work down the entirety of an entire population, and even more specifically, when you look at how this has been focused specifically upon the Western world, well, Western world is predominantly Europeans. Well, something, there's an agenda out there. If you can see all this stuff taking place in the Western world against those Europeans, well, who would be the enemy of the Europeans and why? And why would there be such a concerted effort to do all these things across all these Western world countries? I mean, OD to the answer, or to the asking of deeper questions. But when you look at the condition of the predominant generation ranges that the TV and this propaganda is trying to most appeal to, that's not saying that they're not trying to appeal to a boomer who's, getting up there in age and never woke up, and they're still trying to keep them in their mind-controlled trance. I get it. But I think most people understand what I mean by these two generations, the Z-Gens and the millennials, are the ones they're predominantly going after. And if those Z-Gens or millennials haven't woken up to the fact that it's all programming, it's all lies, it's all this, and they're still in the belief that government's telling them the truth, they wouldn't lie to us on the TV. Here's another thing. Obama removed what was known as the Smith-Mundt Act. The Smith-Mundt Act was put in place after World War II because Americans recognized the amount of brutal propaganda that was used against us on the TV and other ways to suck us into World War II, which was not our war. It was not our war. It was not our fight. But we got sucked in, and once anyway, I'm sorry. I'm going to just skip that. Once we got sucked in and then came back and realized what that was all about, they put in place the Smith-Mundt Act, which was basically an anti-propagandization act that was supposedly put in place to bind and tie the hands of government from using the media and the television as a mechanism to propagandize. When you start to realize what that implies, that they knew that the TV, the media, the news could be used as almost weaponized with propaganda, they put in place the Smith-Mundt Act. You understand what that is? I mean, you really got to understand that there was specific legislation put in to fucking bind the hands of government and make it a no-no. But even though that was in place, they were still using the CIA, clandestine operations, fucking psychological operations with the military, all of these people combining with the people who have controlled the media and the news fucking from the beginning. And then they just started going around the Smith-Mundt Act, covertly fucking mind-fucking everybody as much as they possibly could. And then, in 2010 or 2012, when Obama was in office, they were reauthorizing, I think is the phraseology used, what's known as the NDAA. This is the way I understand it, the National Defense Authorization Act. And then somewhere within those hundreds or thousands of pages of whatever the NDAA had in it, the Smith-Mundt Act, a repeal, effectively, or something that was words to neuter or fully repeal the Smith-Mundt Act, were put in there. They didn't tell the American population either. Think about that. So Obama, on the sly, signed the papers that was effectively approving the legislation to neutralize or remove the Smith-Mundt Act. Now consider the level of propaganda and bullshit that they have been feeding us on the TV and every other means by which they could absolutely propagandize and mindfuck the ever-loving shit out of an entire population. And when you start realizing that you got groups like the CIA involved in this shit, all the way up to special operations groups of the United States fucking military that are fucking put together and designed for psychological warfare, psychological operations, And for those kinds of forces to combine with the very people who are creating television, news, the themes of all this shit, the agendas, what they want you to believe, what they want you to perceive, and when you start to realize that, for instance, Michael Aquino, if you look into who he was, and, he did he got trained in all that stuff. And he was a fucking high-level Satanist, I'm telling you, people. Most people don't understand the gravity of this. So as we sit here and watch through the television, as an example, I don't watch TV, but most people do, or these mainstream mechanisms of influence of the human mind, when you start looking at how and why they can do what they're doing, showing it to you on TV, broadcasting it, live streaming genocide, and most people don't get it, well, everything I've just explained to you in the previous 30 minutes kind of lays in the foundation, the groundwork, if you will, for how they've been able to pull that off. You've got to first get the goddamn population into a condition that's conducive to you being able to do what the fuck they are doing right in front of their faces, and not actually causing the population that's taking that in to get up off their asses and act in face of the horrors, the atrocities, and all of the bullshit. This particular group has a subsect of them that, and you really got to know this. You need to know this, because this is real shit. Because it's playing itself out every single solitary fucking day. There's a subsection of this group of people that have a lot of power and influence, that truly believe to bring in their Messiah, that they can go down the path of being as diabolically evil, all of this stuff relevant to sin, blatantly, openly. It's a similar principle to Aleister Crowley. Crowley believed that through being the most wickedest man alive, that there was some fast track, if you will, to, I don't know, the divine or some place that he was seeking to go, that he thought being an evil prick would somehow fast track him to being. There's a similar concept that this group of people has to fast track the return of their savior. And quite literally, when you start looking at their hell book, that they call a holy book, that is, it's known as the Talmud. When you start looking into what it says, the philosophies that it has, when you start looking at how these people act and behave, and you start realizing that this subsect of this group, literally, I can't, how do I say this? There's no low they won't go to. There's no evil they won't do. There's no sin they won't commit. There's no moral boundary they're not going to cross it. They're going to long jump that son of a bitch. See what I'm saying? They're going to long jump it. They're not just going to cross the boundary. They're going to long jump that son of a bitch. And then once they hit the ground, then they're going to start running even further across the boundary of morality. Here's the thing, and this is a really big point that people need to consider. You and I, we don't think this way. We don't operate this way. We don't scheme on these things. It is so foreign to good people. It is so fucking foreign to good people. So the vast majority of the people out there in the world that are asleep, that would otherwise be considered good people, that don't get it, they literally don't realize that the level of evil that exists in this world is real, it's live, it's boots on the ground. They don't get it. They just don't get it. And if they're grown adults, good luck, you or me or anybody else, convincing them of that. Oh, no, I'm an adult. I can figure it out. I don't see that. No, I don't know. I don't see that. The barrier of their beliefs, their own ignorance, their own pride, their own ego. Excuse me. And then cynicism, skepticism. And then to further things, you got to think about the concept of playing both sides. When you're an evil, diabolical force, and you want to infiltrate things so that you can play on the other side as well. You can get a sense of what the other side knows, thinks about you, its efforts, its strategies, what it's doing, because you infiltrate. You play a particular part. It's like the enemy amongst your ranks is playing the part of one of you and acting and behaving in all the ways that you would expect one of you to act. But this one's not one of you, and everything it sees and learns and figures out about all of you, it's effectively telling the other one. And then, while it's playing the good part, quote unquote, it's going to do things to toxify any efforts that go against the other side, to cast doubt, to cause problems. People, this is an awesome enemy, because it's going against, for instance, us, meaning the good people of the world as an example, and it knows that we don't think like them. It knows that we don't do what they do. We don't process in the way they process, so we're at a disadvantage right there, not knowing that that level of evil is here with us and that it actually controls the fucking world. But try to convince people of that which they haven't figured out for themselves relevant to this stuff. Try to present people paradigm-shattering information, meaning for them, because they haven't taken the time yet, for whatever reason, to figure it out for themselves. You handing them that truth, that would cause a paradigm-shattering moment. Those are usually somewhat emotional for people. There's a little bit of psychological wrestling with things you have to do as you reconcile, go through a bit of cognitive dissonance. Most people aren't going to embrace that kind of stuff with open arms. So that leaves people like me, people like you that have a sense of what's going on, completely and totally screwed, because all of our efforts to wake up our fellow human beings because, well, the world sucks. We care about them. We want the world to be a better place. We want our fellow humans not being taken advantage of. We want things that are, for the benefit of all. The very people that we're trying to wake up are the very people that are going to reject us and see us as crackpots, whack jobs, Looney Tunes, tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorists. You got to think about what it is that knew what it knew to concoct, how much it knew about humans, human development, human civilizations, our societies, mechanisms of influence within our societies, and all of these things, to be able to see all of that, to then begin to craft a multi-generational plan, and then slowly and methodically implement things that we wouldn't perceive or understand what they were doing, having an effect that move forward to where we are now. We're halfway in and halfway out of idiocracy. Really, and how easy do you think it is to influence a population upon the world that's halfway in and halfway out of idiocracy? Half of them are just as ignorant as the day is long. I won't call them dumb. I'll say ignorant, because willfully information has been withheld from them. So when you wonder, when you think of all of these efforts, when you think of what it is they're talking, if you can see it, if you understand what I'm saying, this gives rise to me questioning, where's Team Light side? Where's Team Good side? Where's Team quote unquote God side? Where's any forces that would be considered good that would have helped prevent or at least awaken us to, meaning more of us, to the reality of what was actually happening to us? Because this is something that we never saw. Most people never see. Most people have never seen or understood. And strangely, because of the way that the human mind works, when those of us that do wake up try to wake other people up, we're met with bullshit and resistance. So it's like they know that no mere mortal is going to be able to penetrate the barriers of what it is that they've done to people's minds. All of that points to, you'd think that spiritual daddy in the sky would be helping out his quote-unquote children down here in the earth realm that are having their asses and minds raped, metaphorically, of course, by the evil that was here when we got here. And when you start realizing and asking questions about all the spiritual stuff, religious stuff that people believe about God, its angels and the workers of the light, and blah, 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 you see there's no evidence for that. There's no evidence for that amidst what it is that we have been going through. That shit will really, really, really drop you to a knee when you realize there are no spiritual allies in this realm for us. Nope. Not a goddamn thing. Because you can't point a single solitary motherfucking individual out there that you can tell has somehow had some spiritual backing, guts. You just can't identify it. But fuck, you can identify all of the evil shit out there. You can pick it apart, see what it's doing, see how it's doing it, recognize the layer of our fucking society that it's affecting and impacting. You can see the impact of what the fuck it's doing on people's minds, their perceptions, their beliefs, the whole 9 yards. That's effectively rendering them impotent. Impotent. And when you look at the vast majority, or I don't even want to say the vast majority, what is it, 50%? I don't know. A substantial portion of the millennial generation has been rendered impotent. To further show you the point of impotence, consider what you know about the last 4 years, what's been done. What's been done right in front of our faces. They're rubbing shit in our faces, people. And mankind collectively is as impotent as a flaccid penis. Period, paragraph. Those Dutch farmers there, they've got some fire in them. And a handful of things have happened, little things here and there. You got to love the Dutch farmers for, literally spraying liquid poo on their government buildings, because their government is such horrible, fucking demonic, satanic, just filth. This is how you do it. You subvert them. You do it slowly over time. You poison them. You toxify them, meaning their minds with hypersexualization, hyperviolence, and all of these other things. And at the same time, people, they've begun to poison the food. They've poisoned the air. They've poisoned the water. Medicine is look at what they do to us with that. People, this is kind of why I've talked about the hell realm thing. Anyway, food for thought. How have they pulled all this off? They're the most evil, diabolical things to have ever lived as humans. They have all the resources that they need, so they can slowly begin to buy out, influence, corrupt anybody and everybody in a position that they need. Anybody and everybody that gets in their way. They can either bribe you, corrupt you, buy you off, have you killed. And since they have all the money and they have all these connections, because they have the money, well, then they can make sure that they don't suffer for the things that they do. Things can get wiped underneath the rug. I mean, it's literally evil. When you look at it from the cop on the beat all the way up to the top, it's completely corrupted. It's completely toxic. Not a one of them deserves fucking any accolades for their goodness and what they've done. From the cop on the beat all the way up, because the cops on the beat have effectively become the military police force, the boots on the ground, further circumventing posse comitatus. See, they create these laws and rules, and then they start working around them when they get in their fucking way. Well, posse comitatus prevented a standing army from being on the streets of the United States of America. So what do? They changed their standards after 9/11, and then they started making you have to be dumber to be a cop, and then they get you all trained up by militaries from other countries that have the worst human rights violations, atrocities upon the earth, this one particular military, and you have that military train all your dumbed down, stupid cops that have a propensity for murder. So then we see our cops as the tyrants that they effectively have become, policing a population using military tactics for crowd control that they were taught by Well, this country over in the Middle East is trying to basically genocide a country. Those people have infiltrated the entirety of our fucking government. If you start looking at the names of the people who are in the cabinet of Biden, the cabinet of Trump, the funders, the backers, and all this, it's all them. They showed it to you and they live, humans. They fucking showed it to you and they live. They showed it to you in the movie They Live. And they're laughing at everybody because what did they do? They created a B movie and they used a wrestler to be the star. Those people in that movie acted out in a B-movie kind of way, with bad acting and all that shit. Some of the truest shit that we have ever been fucking presented with. And since most people don't watch B-movies, let alone believe the things they hear in B-movies, and since it's all packaged as entertainment, well, how could that be true? So when you wonder why they can show it to everybody and nobody gets off their ass, they don't understand what they're seeing. They don't recognize what they're seeing. They don't know the enemy. They don't recognize the enemy. They're completely subverted. And amidst all of that, you see the rise of drug use, you see the rise of apathy, you see the rise of nihilism, you see the rise of a whole lot of things that when they're burrowed in the psychologies of, generations, is going to increase the rise of the people being effectively impotent in the face of what it is that we're seeing and have been seeing. And when you consider it from a spiritual perspective, if there is something in any context that anybody believes, the good side, the God side, the light side, this side or the other, they've been watching. They've known. They've been watching generation by generation what happens to the children of our species. They've been watching generation by generation while we've gotten dumbed down and weren't even aware of it. They've been watching generation by generation as the scales tipped further and further and further. They've been watching. And I'll be honest with you, for all the things that you can point out and identify for Team Darkside, and it's a fucking laundry list. They control everything. They control every layer of the motherfucking matrix. All the people within the motherfucker. I mean, it's obscene. You can't show me or point out to me the opposite of that. You can't show me that Team Lightside. You can't show me the backup and the resources. You can't show me the efforts being put forth. You can't show me. You can't show me. You can't show me because it doesn't fucking exist. And meaning not in the way that you see for Team Darkside. Oh no. Oh no. Unified, well thought out, funded, connected, all the resources, all the systems, all of it. Hell realm, anyone? Realm devoid of good, protective spirits. Those guardian angels, they're out there to prevent you from dying before you're supposed to so that they can extract from you through all the suffering they're going to put you through all this fucking bullshit. They're not there to truly protect you from anything other than the fact that you can't get dead before you've given up. They've extracted from you the quotient, the quota, if you will, whatever word it would be, of the amount of loosh that you're supposed to produce. I think that's what that is. That's just there to keep you in the game. I could go on and on and on and on and on talking about, explaining various layers. When you start to get out of the physical realm and you start getting into the lower astral, the astral, the etheric, and all of those other types of realms, you start understanding what's out there, the level of evil that's out there, and how devoid of benevolent spirits and entities it is out there. The fact that all of these evil entities and spirits that are out there can and do play the part as angel, guardian, ancestor, or something. They can shapeshift, do whatever the fuck they want, play the part, present themselves to you any way they want. And if we don't know this and we can't identify this, we buy the lie, we fall for what they say to us, and we're being ground into hamburger, metaphorically, in ways that most people don't understand. And this shit comes from multiple aspects of our reality. Literally, this shit comes from the incorporeal realms as well. And when you start to realize the level of influence and manipulation that's taking place on all of us from the incorporeal realms, and then start to realize if we were cut off from things like the sixth senses, whatever they might be, clairvoyance, clairaudience, or anything that would have given us some perceptive abilities in the incorporeal, in a similar way, we have the five senses to perceive our 3D world. Isn't it interesting that we were engineered without those? And if we did have them, we don't even really realize what they were. We say, some people have a sixth sense. We've either been cut off or we were engineered without them, so that the level of manipulation that actually takes place from these non-physical incorporeal realms could never be perceived by the little fucking meat sacks that were being so attacked and brutalized in these ways from these realms of the existence that we live and exist in that we can't see and perceive with our eyeballs. Seriously, this is some seriously fucked up shit. And when you realize the trajectory that they're taking everybody on, the trajectory that they have for mankind, show me any evidence of anything that you can even slightly call benevolent, except for, where and when you see goodness, loving kindness, compassion, and all that stuff coming out of humans. And even for the good ones, this world has been so goddamn brutal Do you know how many of those good ones are just beaten down to the point where, you know, oh, Jesus, fuck me, Agnes. See, knowing what it is that I know has been a large reason why I've gone so nihilistic over the last 5-6 years. The encounter that I had with the Australian woman that I've, told you guys about, that was one of the most corrosive, destructive things I've ever gone through in my life. That added to it. I mean, when you have somebody that to you is quite literally your best friend, somebody that you literally loved from a place within yourself that you'd never loved another person, and a whole lot of it, and then all of a sudden, boom, boom, no answers, no insight, no closure. This shit will drive you crazy. And it induced my dark night. It induced all the things I went through in the dark night. And it was through all of that stuff I started analyzing all these layers and being able to see all this to the degree that I did. All of that happening after, 2.5 years of working with ayahuasca, doing about 125 ceremonies completely with ayahuasca in San Pedro, cracking my consciousness wide open, having the veils torn off of my eyes, and then coming back and experiencing that and the hell that shit put me through. Yeah. That was some fucking, whoa. I mean, I just really sit fucking stunned at what this world really is. I sit fucking stunned at what it is that we believe that allows this world to continue to be what it is. I sit fucking stunned at the level of impotence that I see out of the entirety of the human species and the level of ignorance that's so fucking offensive. It's off the charts. See, here's the thing. I'm a 10th grade dropout. I never went back to school. I'm a 10th grade fucking dropout that was born to 2 narcissistic parents that quite literally didn't love me. How is it that someone like myself, some people would consider, I got a career, I had a job, a career and jobs and took care of myself. This whole homelessness thing and all this shit, it's a byproduct of the lockdowns, the attack on the small businesses and all that other shit. And I haven't been able to recover since. So that's why I'm in the position I am. I haven't lived as a homeless guy for all of my fucking life. No, I've known life as a normal fucking individual with a corporate career that was, trying to find love, trying to make a life, trying to. And then for those of you that know what I went through in, 2015, 2014 with these synchronicities that opened up for me, that when I still believed in God in a traditional sense, I thought I was quite literally being called by God to walk a different path, to be in service to others, to try to be a light in the world and, go and work for Team Light side, so to speak. Although I was never on the dark side, but this was like, it would have been, I kind of looked at it like an official position, so to speak. And when I come back to realize that those were likely synthetic synchronicities that were imposed into my experience of life by something I didn't even know was working at the time, that caused me to do everything I did of my own free will. Walked into the Amazon and met the woman that did the thing, and a few other people that did things, and it's just like, this is a big game down here. And they're fucking playing our lives as their game. This is not about love and light. This is not about growing and cultivating humans. This is not about any of the things that we believe. This is the most obvious and the things that I can, if you literally put a gun to my head, so to speak, I'd go with Lush Farm. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that there's something out there that is just mind-fucking the ever-loving shit out of the entirety of the human species, generation by generation by generation. And when and where in our history we see resets, big gaps in time and shit like that, I'll bet you that's where they came down, whatever the fuck they are, and harvested and thin the fucking herd. That's probably what's been happening. So if our origins are a genetically modified species of hybrids, hominid versus whatever these fucking Anunnaki were, they kind of have a hot potato in their hand too, because what's within us might actually be more than they'll be able to deal with if we were able to get it all fired up and turned on. So they somehow have found a way to capitalize on all the energy that's within us, possibly a byproduct of all that genetic manipulation, because we got new genetic code, and we've just been farmed. We've been farmed for the energy, because we're so stimulatable. Because the endocrine system is in our bodies that doses us with these chemicals that we're supposed to control ourselves for. And when you consider how we have to ride the crazy train, when you get emotionally charged, it's just like, holy shit, man. So that produces the energy coming out of us through being directly dosed with chemicals in the endocrine system based off of the external stimuli of the rancid people, the ridiculous world, the ridiculous circumstances, the information that we take in stimulates all these chemicals. Seriously, people, having all of this in my head and not being able to get it all out, not being able to share it with the world, not being able to make any kind of a meaningful impact is its own torture and torment in and of itself. It's like its own prison sentence in and of itself, being locked in, all of the energy that I was locked in for as long as I was, that drove me into analyzing every goddamn single solitary aspect of things to the degree that I could, that gives me the ability to say the things that I do now. It takes a lot to get to a point where you realize that there are humans out there that operate from the most malicious, diabolical, evil, malevolent, caustic, corrupt soul, spiritually corrupt fucking perspective you could possibly operate from. And I got my first taste of that with Julie. because of what she did and how it all went down, the fact that she was cunning, ruthless, merciless, predatory, and narcissistic as it comes, was my first big fucking shove a piece of pie down my throat and forced me to eat the whole thing. And then as I started going down various rabbit holes and figuring out more and more and more about, the tribe and other things, I started to realize that it's wasn't only her, obviously, it's a whole group of them. They all have very specific blood. And people don't even realize that there's so much to blood, it's not even funny. The genetics actually matter. And, in the context of the seed of Satan, this is who these people are. This is what Julie ended up being. Genetically, she's got this seed in her blood. So do the people that are running this fucking world. They've got this in their blood. And I'll leave you with this. And I'm not religious, but it's just a point of fact, or case in point. In the Bible, the God of the Bible, I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying this is the way the story generally goes. He told humans, he said, go and do something. Go and make these people, make them go. Make them go. Man, woman, child, pet, all of it. Wipe it out. Go. I'm God. I'm telling you to do it. And here's the thing. It wasn't done. We, humans, whatever ones the God told to do, didn't do it. And I think the general gist is, all right, motherfuckers, you don't want to do what I tell you? Well, now you're going to suffer for it, because they're going to breed and spread upon the earth. And they have, and they did. And look at what the position that humankind is in. Because at least back then, in a loosely fitting kind of way, we didn't follow the directions that were given to us by quote-unquote God to do what he told us to do. Yeah, there's, I don't know, call me crazy, but I see that as kind of, that has a place, that fits, it really does. These people are quite literally the living, breathing embodiment, the seed of Satan, that whole archetype. It's real. They live and breathe and they walk among us. And I will be honest with you, had it not been for Julie doing what she did, revealing the true darkness and the true malevolent spirit, the Jezebel spirit, that whole thing that was in her, I had to discover all of that, figure that out for myself, and wrestle with the fact that this person that I thought was the most beautiful human being to have ever entered in my life was actually the most malevolent, one of the most malevolent. And I had to wrestle with the fact that, oh shit, there are people in this world that operate with a rule book of life, with a playbook of life, that you or I would never, we don't even understand it, because our rule books contain such vastly different things. The things that we use in our rule, that have in our rule, are vastly different. You would never expect that there are other players on the field, so to speak, and we're all playing the same game, right? No, we're not. We're playing our game with our rule book, and they're playing their game with theirs. We're the target, and their rule book is vastly different than ours. And when I came to realize that woman, literally, willfully, went out of her way in ways that boggled my mind to do what she did, and to inflict and impose maximum fucking damage, maximum fucking carnage. And she did. The woman took me the fuck out. I mean, she absolutely fucking succeeded in what it is she attempted to do. And when you sit with that, not you, me, long enough, and you start to analyze and you start to break it away, when the caustic energy that's in you because of the experience starts to tear all the layers of the things that you believe, and you start to see what lies underneath, it's just like, holy shit. So I had this experience with this woman that showed me the true darkness within so many humans, like the true fucking nature of the essence of the very fucking being that they are is demonic. Well, when you think in those terms, how would demonic people behave? Sometimes they come in like a bull in a china closet, and sometimes they come in with a whisper and deception and the mask of a covert narcissist. So it was that experience with that woman that gave me the willingness and drive to do all this deep research, to go down all these rabbit holes, to put all this together, to grind on what I knew and what I was learning and put it all together and see. That's why I say, hell realm, this isn't what we think it is. There is no benevolent deity in the sky. We don't see a force of things looking out for us. We don't see it. We don't see it. We don't see it. So what does that tell you, humans? What does that tell you about the world you're really in, the realm you're really in, what's running it, what's in control? Compare the God story versus the devil story. Compare all the things, and then show me any evidence for any of it, anywhere, ever. And in the spirit of compassion and forgiveness, these vile, evil beings that look like humans, they know that we have that within us, and they capitalize on it. And when they do what they do from the places and spaces that drive them to do it, are we to have compassion for them? Do you have compassion for a demon that does the things that demons do? No. It is the living embodiment and force of evil. And we all know, because it's been playing itself out in our fucking world right in front of our faces, what happens when you don't properly fucking deal with evil. Take it easy, everybody.
This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is.